In my grandmother's generation, some parents gave their most precious, most loved child a deliberately ugly name, a plain name, a lowly name, sometimes almost an insult of a name, and they did it precisely because they loved the child so much. If that makes no sense to you, stay for 2 minutes, because the reason behind it reveals something about what a name actually is that most people in the West never learn. In the West, parents choose a name because they like how it sounds. In my family, a name is a sentence written by your parents about the person they are praying you will become, and you carry that sentence every day of your life. When someone in the West asks what your name means, the answer is usually a shrug or a story about a grandmother or nothing at all. When someone asks what my son's name means, I can talk for 10 minutes, because his name is not a label we stuck on him. It is a hope we buried inside him, in characters chosen so carefully that choosing them took my husband and me the better part of a year. And understanding why we spent a year on 2 syllables will change how you think about the name you were given and never questioned. If you have ever felt a strange, quiet emptiness about your own name, a sense that it is just a sound people make to get your attention, rather than something that actually means anything, this video is going to show you why, and it is not because your parents did not love you. It is because 2 civilizations made a completely different decision about what a name is for. And once you see the decision your culture made, you're going to understand something about identity and belonging and the quiet weight of being known that most people carry their whole lives without ever putting into words. Let me be honest about what this is and what it isn't, because I don't want to waste the trust you gave me by clicking. I am not going to tell you that the Chinese way of naming is beautiful and the Western way is empty, because that would be a lie and a lazy one. And this channel does not sell you the fantasy that some other culture quietly does everything better. The Western way of naming carries its own real beauty and its own real weight, and I am going to be fair to it, because there is love in it too. And the Chinese way has a genuine cost, a heaviness I will be honest with you about before the end, because a name that is a hope can also become a name that is a burden. I am describing my own family, the parents who named me and the son my husband and I named, not a billion people, because Chinese families name their children in as many different ways as any people on earth. But there is a common thread in the tradition I come from, and that thread reveals something worth understanding. Here is the difference, stated as plainly as I can. In much of the Western world, a name is chosen primarily for how it sounds and how it feels. Parents say a name aloud, they imagine calling it across a playground, they consider whether it is beautiful, whether it is strong, whether it will age well, whether it honors a relative, whether it is too common or too strange. These are real considerations, and there is genuine care in them. But notice what sits at the center of the Western choice. It is largely aesthetic and relational. The name sounds good, or it carries a family connection, or it feels right. What the name almost never does in the modern Western world is mean something in the plain, literal sense. Most people in the West do not know what their own name means, and it does not trouble them because meaning was never the point. The name is a beautiful sound that becomes you by being attached to you for a lifetime. In the tradition I was raised in, the sound matters too, but it is not the center. The center is the meaning. A Chinese given name is usually built from characters, and each character is a word, an image, a quality, a piece of the world. And so when parents name a child, they are not just choosing a pleasant sound, they are choosing words, they are writing something. A name might mean something like gentle wisdom, or rising brightness, or the quiet strength of jade, or a reference to a line of poetry 1,000 years old, or a virtue the parents hope the child will grow into, or a memory of the season or the circumstance of the birth. The name is a tiny poem, a compressed prayer, a message from the parents to the child that says, "This is who we hope you will become. This is the quality we are placing in you, like a seed." And every time someone says your name for the rest of your life, they will be speaking that hope aloud, whether they know it or not. And sometimes the name holds not a hope but a memory, the circumstance of the birth itself pressed into the child forever. A child born during a snowfall might carry the character for snow. A child born in a year of hardship might carry a character for endurance, or one born after a long-awaited pregnancy, a character that means quietly, at last. A child born far from home might carry the name of the missed homeland in their own name. I have a relative whose name holds the character for the city her parents had just fled, so that her whole life she has carried, in the word people use to call her, the place her family lost, a small monument to a home, worn like a locket that never comes off. Think of what it means to be named that way. To have the moment you entered the world, its weather, its griefs, its long-awaited joys, sealed into the sound that will follow you to your last day. Your name becomes a story, the opening line of your own story, written by the two people who were there when it began. A Western name points outward, to a grandmother, to a saint, to a sound the parents loved. A Chinese name, at its fullest, points inward and backward and forward all at once, to the moment of your arrival, to the hope your parents held, to the lineage you extend, all folded into 2 or 3 syllables you will answer to forever. Let me tell you what that actually looked like in my own home, because I think the doing of it says more than any explanation. When I was pregnant with my son, my husband and I did not browse the list of pleasant-sounding names and pick a favorite. We sat many evenings with paper between us, and we talked about him, the person we did not yet know but were already trying to imagine. What did we hope for him? Not what job, not what achievement, but what kind of soul. We wrote characters and set them beside each other and read them aloud and felt how they sat together, because a Chinese name is also a small piece of music, and the characters must sound right against each other and against the family name. We considered the tones, the way the syllables rise and fall, because a name with clashing tones is like a chord played wrong. We thought about the strokes, the way the characters look written down, their balance on the page. We considered what each character had meant across centuries of use, what poems it appeared in, what it might quietly summon. We rejected characters that were beautiful in meaning but too heavy, names that would have placed too large a hope on too small a person. It took the better part of a year, and when we finally settled on his name, it was not because we had found a sound we liked. It was because we had written in 2 characters the truest and gentlest version of what we hoped he would become, and we were ready to hand it to him and spend the rest of our lives speaking it. We are about a quarter of the way into what I most want to share, and if this is already landing, subscribe, because I make these for the specific person who has always felt that something about modern life is strangely weightless, strangely disconnected from meaning, and who senses that older cultures were holding on to something we have quietly let slip. And stay with me, because I'm about to show you what it actually does to a person to grow up carrying a name that means something, and then I am going to be honest with you about the real weight of it, the cost that comes with a name that is also an expectation, because this channel does not pretend the old ways are free. So let me show you what it does to a child to be named this way, because this is where the difference stops being trivia and starts being about the shape of a life. A child whose name means something grows up inside that meaning. My son's name contains a character that means, roughly, to persevere with a quiet and steady heart. That is not an accident, and it is not decoration. My husband and I chose it after long conversation about the kind of man we hoped he would become. Not loud, not flashy, but steady, the kind of person who endures. And here's the thing that Western naming rarely does. Every single day, many times a day, my son hears that hope spoken. His teachers say it, his friends say it, we say it, he says it himself when he introduces himself. And slowly, without anyone ever sitting him down to explain it, the meaning sinks into him, becomes part of how he understands who he is, becomes a quiet standard he measures himself against, a direction his character is gently pulled toward simply because it is the word that means him. A name that means something is a kind of lifelong, invisible instruction, repeated so constantly and so softly that it shapes the person without their ever noticing they are being shaped. Consider how strange and how powerful that is. My son will never remember a single moment of being taught what his name means and being told to live up to it, because we will never do that, because that would turn the gift into a lecture and the hope into a demand. Instead, the meaning will reach him the way water reaches the roots of a tree, slowly from all directions, through 10,000 ordinary moments of simply being called. When he is praised, the praise will attach to a name that means steadiness. When he is comforted, the comfort will attach to it. When he is scolded, when he is loved, when he introduces himself to a stranger, when he signs his schoolwork, the same quiet word will be there, meaning what it means. And over a whole childhood, that word will seep so deeply into his sense of himself that steadiness will feel less like a quality he is trying to have and more like simply the kind of person he already is. That is the genius of it, and also the danger of it, which I will come to. The meaning does not instruct from the outside like a rule. It grows from the inside like an identity, because it arrived not as a command but as the very sound of his own self. And no child argues with the sound of their own name. They simply become it, a little. over years without ever deciding to. And now I can tell you why, in my grandmother's time, some parents did the strange thing I opened with, giving a cherished child a humble or even ugly name. Because if a name is a real thing, a thing with weight and meaning that shapes a life, then in the old belief, a name could also be seen and coveted by forces you did not want looking too closely at your child. A precious name, a name that announced how loved and how promising the child was, might draw the envy of jealous spirits, or simply tempt fate to take away something so obviously treasured. And so, out of a fierce and superstitious love, some parents would give a beloved child a lowly milk name, a plain, everyday name to be called at home, something so unremarkable that misfortune would pass right over the child without noticing there was anything worth taking. A family who had lost babies before might name the next one something like Little Dog or Small Mistake, precisely because the child was their whole heart and they were trying to hide that heart in plain sight. It sounds backward until you understand the logic underneath it, which is the very logic of this whole video. These parents believed absolutely that a name was powerful, that it did something, that it was not a neutral label but a force acting on a life. You do not bother to hide a child behind a humble name unless you believe, in your bones, that a name has real weight. The ugly name was not the absence of care. It was care so intense it disguised itself. And whether or not you believe in the spirits, the instinct underneath is one the modern world has forgotten. The instinct that says a name is not nothing, a name is a power, and what you call a child matters more than we let ourselves remember. Now compare that, gently, to the experience of a name chosen for its sound. A beautiful name, a beloved name, a name given with enormous love, but a name that does not mean anything in particular, that points at no quality, that contains no hope the child can grow into. That child is loved just as much. But that child grows up with a name that is, in a sense, empty of direction, a beautiful container with nothing inside pulling them anywhere. And I think this is part of that strange weightlessness so many people in the modern world feel, the sense of being a self without a shape, an identity without a grain, a person who could become anything and is therefore anchored to nothing. When your very name means nothing in particular, some quiet part of you absorbs the idea that perhaps you, too, are not particularly about anything. That identity is just a sound the world attached to you, rather than a meaning you were entrusted to carry. We are halfway through, and before I give you the reframe that ties this together, I want you to answer one question honestly, just to yourself. Think about your own name. Do you know what it means in the plain literal sense, and does that meaning point at any quality you were hoped to become? Or is your name simply a sound you have always answered to, chosen because your parents liked it or because it honored someone they loved? Sit with which of those two you are, because here is the reframe that undid the whole comparison for me. The Chinese way is not better because meaning is better than beauty. Both traditions are trying to do the same deep thing, which is to give a child an identity to grow into. The Western name does it through belonging, through connecting the child to a family, a heritage, a lineage of people who carried that sound before them. The Chinese name does it through meaning, through planting a hope and a direction inside the child like a seed. Neither is empty. They are two different answers to the same beautiful question, which is, how do you hand a newborn a self? When a Western mother names her daughter after the grandmother she adored, she is not choosing meaning in my culture's sense, but she is doing something just as profound. She is saying, you come from someone, you are a continuation of a woman I loved. You carry her forward. That is belonging, and belonging is its own kind of meaning, maybe the deepest kind. And when a Chinese mother names her son for a quality she hopes he grows into, she is not ignoring belonging because the family name already sits in front, holding him inside his lineage. But she is adding to it a direction, a hope, a seed. The two traditions have simply each leaned harder on one half of what a name can do. The West leaned toward the name as a thread connecting the child backward to the people they came from. My culture leaned toward the name as a compass, pointing the child forward to the person they might become. And the truth is that a name can be both a thread and a compass. And the richest naming in any culture manages to be. If that just rearranged something for you, share this video with the one person you know who has always felt oddly disconnected from their own name, because this might be the first time anyone has explained to them what a name is even for, and it can reach them in 20 minutes instead of the years it took me to understand it. That is the whole reason a channel like this can exist. So let me make this concrete and usable because a philosophy you cannot do anything with is just decoration, and this matters whether or not you ever name a child. The first thing worth taking from the Chinese way is the practice of knowing, and if necessary, reclaiming the meaning of your own name. Even a Western name chosen for sound almost always has a buried meaning, an origin in some older language, a quality it once pointed at before the meaning was forgotten. To go and learn what your name originally meant and then to choose to grow into that meaning is to take an empty feeling name and fill it, to convert a sound into a small, quiet instruction you give yourself. Your name might mean strong, or bringer of light, or beloved, or wise, or watchful, or crowned, or free. Almost every name meant something once in the Hebrew, or the Greek, or the Old German, or the Gaelic it came from, before it wore down into pure sound, and you can go and dig that meaning back up. You can decide as an adult that the word is not an accident, that it is a direction, and you can begin to carry it the way a child raised in my tradition carries theirs. I have watched people do this and change subtly because of it. A woman who learned her name meant bright and clear began half in play and half in earnest to ask herself in hard moments what the bright and clear version of herself would do, and slowly it became a small private compass. A man who learned his name meant defender began to notice that he did, in fact, want to be someone who protected people, and let the name quietly confirm a direction he had been half afraid to claim. This is not magic, and it is not self-deception. It is simply choosing to treat the sound you have answered to your whole life as though it were, after all, a small instruction, and then growing toward it on purpose. The child in my tradition is given that instruction without a choice. The adult in yours can choose to pick it up, and there is a particular power in choosing it, in deciding as a grown person that your name will mean something and that you will grow into it, that a child who simply inherits the meaning never gets to feel. The second thing worth taking is what this teaches about the power of what we repeat. The reason a meaningful name shapes a child is not magic. It is repetition. The meaning gets into the person because it is spoken thousands upon thousands of times across a childhood. And this is a principle you can use far beyond names, because whatever words surround a child constantly, whatever they hear said about themselves again and again, becomes the quiet architecture of how they understand who they are. A child called clumsy 1,000 times grows into clumsiness. A child whose steadiness is quietly named and noticed grows toward steadiness. A child called difficult learns that difficult is simply what they are and settles into it, because a child believes the words the people they trust keep using about them, long before they are old enough to question whether those words are fair. We are, all of us who raise children, engaged in a constant quiet naming that goes far beyond the name on the birth certificate. Every time we say, "You are so kind," or "You never listen," or "Look how carefully you did that," or "Why are you always like this?" we are pressing a small word into soft clay, and the words we press most often are the ones that harden into the child's sense of self. The formal name is only the most concentrated, most deliberate version of a thing we are doing carelessly all day long. And so the lesson of the meaningful name is not really about names at all. It is a warning and an invitation. Be careful what you repeatedly call a child, because you are writing their self-image with the words you use most, and you will not get to choose later which ones stuck. Choose to name, out loud and often, the qualities you hope to grow, the way my husband and I chose the character for our son, not because saying a thing makes it instantly true, but because a child grows toward the words that are spoken over them, and those words might as well be hopes. The name is just the most concentrated example of a truth that runs through all of parenting, which is that we are always, with our repeated words, writing on our children, and we should choose what we write with enormous care because they will carry it the way my son carries the character that means to persevere with a steady heart. The third thing, and the deepest, is what the Chinese name teaches about belonging to something larger than yourself, because a traditional Chinese name often does something else, something the Western first name almost never does. It places the family name first before the personal name. The lineage comes before the individual. You are, in the very structure of your name, a member of your family before you are yourself, a link in a chain that stretches back through your ancestors and forward through your descendants. And there is something in that structure, that quiet daily reminder that you belong to something older and larger than your own single life, that answers a loneliness the modern individualized self does not even know it has. And in some families, mine among them, the structure went deeper still, through something called a generation name. In this old practice, every child of the same generation, not just brothers and sisters, but cousins across the whole extended family, shares one character in their given name, a character assigned to that generation, often drawn from a poem written by an ancestor generations ago, a poem where each successive character names each successive generation, so that the family is literally spelling out an ancestral verse across the centuries, one baby at a time. Think about what that does to a child. When my relatives of the same generation gather, we can hear, in each other's names, that we belong to the same link in the chain, that we are the same rung of a ladder our great-great-grandparents began building before any of us existed, and that will keep rising long after we are gone. Your name tells you not only which family you belong to, but where in time you stand within it, which generation's turn it is to carry the family forward. That is a kind of belonging the modern individualized name cannot give. The sense of being not a free-floating self who happened to be born, but a named and expected member of a story already in progress, handed your place in the line the moment you were given your name. To be named in a way that says you are your family, and then you are your generation, and then you are you, is to be given, along with your identity, a home to hold it in, and a place in a story far older than yourself. Now let me be honest about the cost because I promised I would, and because this channel does not sell you a romanticized culture. A name that is a hope can become a name that is a weight. When you give a child a name that means be brilliant or bring honor, or be the strong one, you are also, without meaning to, handing them an expectation they never agreed to carry, a standard built into the very word they answer to. I have known people crushed a little by their own names, people whose name meant something like great achievement and who felt, every time it was spoken, the quiet ache of not having achieved enough, the sense of being a disappointment encoded into the sound of their own identity. I think of a man I knew whose name meant, roughly, the pride of the country. A magnificent name, a name heavy with hope, given by parents who believed with their whole hearts that he was destined for greatness. And he was a kind, ordinary, gentle man who wanted a quiet life, and every time someone said his name, he felt the gap between the enormous thing he was called and the modest thing he was, and it sat on him like a coat too large, a lifelong small sorrow stitched into the very word people used to summon him. He once told me quietly that he envied people with simple names, names that asked nothing of them. His parents had meant only love, but they had, without knowing it, written an expectation across his life that he could never quite fulfill, and could never quite escape either, because it was his own name, spoken 100 times a day, a hope that had curdled, through no one's fault, into a weight. That is the shadow side of a meaningful name, and it is real. The Western name, precisely because it means nothing in particular, leaves the child freer, less directed but also less burdened, handed a beautiful open space rather than a hope they must live up to. And so the two traditions are, once again, trading the same coin from opposite sides. Meaning gives direction, but can become pressure. Openness gives freedom, but can feel like weightlessness. And the wisest naming, I have come to think, holds a little of both. A name with a meaning gentle enough to guide without crushing, a hope light enough to carry, offered as a gift the child may grow into rather than a debt they must repay. That is the thing I want to leave you with, because it reframes something most people never think about at all. Your name is not nothing, whether it was chosen for its meaning or its sound, whether it carries a hope or a heritage, or simply a music your parents loved. It was the first gift you were ever given, the first word that was ever true of you, the sound the people who made you chose to call the new person they had brought into the world. And you get to decide what it means now. You can go and learn the meaning buried in it and grow toward that meaning on purpose. You can carry it as a hope rather than a burden, a direction rather than a demand. You can let it connect you, the way a Chinese name connects a child, to the people who came before you and the people who will come after. A name is a small thing, 2 syllables, a sound in the air. But in the tradition I come from, we believe that small thing is a seed. And what you decide to grow from it is, in the end, up to you. I don't know. If this video shifted something in the way you see your own name and the quiet weight it has carried all your life, share it with someone who needs to hear it. And if you want more on how the world's wisest cultures quietly build meaning, identity, and belonging into a life, subscribe. There's a lot more coming. See you in the next one.